Thank you very much for inviting me to this wonderful event. As the topic of today's conference suggests, I focus on the specific macroeconomic measures to achieve macroeconomic stability. Before going to this discussion, let me briefly reiterate why macroeconomic stability is important. As many of the previous speakers mentioned, that what is needed in this country is the sustainable growth, not just the short-term pickup of the growth and boom and bust. This country needs a sustainable long-term growth. But as the Foreign Investment Council mentioned in the previous speech, the businessmen considered the stable macroeconomic condition is the #1 priority, precondition for sustainable growth. And obviously, through this investment in, the more long-term investment. And, repeating this message, actually, what you need right now is the macroeconomic stability, but macroeconomic stability per se is not the objective. This is the precondition for the sustainable growth. And at the same time, there are many economic studies about this welfare cost of the macroeconomic stability. When the inflation is up and down, exchange rate is up and down, people living in the country suffer. So for that, country need a macroeconomic stability. Putting in a specific Serbian context, what should be done for macroeconomic stability here at this particular moment? Actually, timing of this conference cannot be better than now, especially given this government new proposal of these economic measures, not only for the next year, but also the medium term. So taking this, the opportunity, I will lay out what this country, in the policy point, should be done, what this country needs for the macroeconomic stability. The first is the fiscal consolidation. And then second is the structural reforms, which support the real sector activities as well as the fiscal consolidation. And then third element is the continuation of a flexible exchange regime and the prudent economic policy. These three kind of a broad objective, the target of the policy is not separate, they are complementary each other. So one cannot be achieved without the others. So let me turn into the fiscal situation first. Actually, the fiscal consolidation is crucial, as the Prime Minister mentioned, and many other speakers already mentioned, and then many ministers mentioned in the press interview in the last couple of weeks. As many of you are aware, the IMF had an annual visit in the last May, and then we produced a so-called IMF STEP report, which was published in July. Since then, supplementary budget has been passed, and then recently, a government announced consolidation measures. This chart was from the previous STEP report, so that those measures are not fully reflected, but the qualitatively, the story is almost remain unchanged. So bottom line is that under the unchanged policy, fiscal deficit and public debt are unsustainable, period. When the growth is 2 to 3% and the public deficit is about 8% under the unchanged policy, then there is no way to stabilize that. The public debt will grow if there is some crucial changes in the public policy is not made. At the same time, Serbia faced the large external imbalance. The external current account deficit is quite high, almost double digit, even if it is shrinking this year. And then what it means that without fiscal adjustment, closing this external imbalance only through exchange rate adjustment, so-called nominal depreciation, the magnitude of the adjustment is so large that it will damage some, like a large, it will have a large balance sheet impact on banks, public sector, as well as these private activities. So how can the Serbian government or Serbian economy deliver the required fiscal adjustment, consolidation? First, before we get to that, we have to think about this current status of the public finance. First, in my opinion, there is limited room for further tax increase or increased revenue. The revenue to GDP ratio is about 40% right now, which is not low compared to peers and then compared to the income level. And the major tax rate, VAT, labor tax, and excises and CIT, corporate income tax, are not lower either compared to the regions. However, there is certainly a room for further revenue increases through better administration, such as tackling gray economy or improving this revenue the tax compliances. At the same time, in the recent history tells us that the tax rate increase, especially corporate income tax from 10 to 15% and the VAT increase from 18 to 20%, has not stopped the deterioration of the fiscal balance, which means that the cause and solution to deal with the fiscal situation must be in the other area. In that sense, expanding cuts are crucial. The kind of simple characterization of the Serbian public finance is that the mandatory spending is too high. There are, two charts illustrate this in comparison with the other countries. First, pension and social spending is extremely high compared to the other emerging market economies, as well as compared to even advanced economies. At the same time, government wage bill is higher than the average of the advanced economy, which is almost 20% in 2013, I guess. And then this is almost like a 3.5 and 4 percentage point higher than the emerging market peers. At the same time, as ministers mentioned before, subsidies to the public socially owned enterprises are very large, and then the professor Petrovic had an interview yesterday that all the savings made from this announced measure could be used to provide a guarantee to socially owned enterprise. So unless these issues are handled, it is very difficult to reduce the spending. So given this understanding about this current status of the public finance, I will briefly discuss these consolidation measures announced by the government last week. The bottom line, the positive side is that the need for fiscal consolidation was fully recognized by the government. There was a harmonized voice within the government that the fiscal consolidation is essential. And then these measures are broadly put in the 6 categories. And then we, IMF, as we mentioned in the press statement after the last visit, we think is the welcome step in the right direction. First, measures include the solidarity tax, which deals with the large, like a public wage bills, and the VAT increase, reduction of the subsidies to socially owned enterprise, savings in goods and services, and then exploring cheaper financing and in general improvement of the general business environment. These are good measures, but as you know, I don't think this country suffered the shortage of the good ideas. The key was that the implementation and credibility. So it is absolutely key that steadfast implementation of the announced measure in a credible manner. At the same time, IMF think that the announced measure is not as ambitious as it could be. So more ambitious and more durable and credible measures will be needed to reverse the rising public debt at this moment. As we mentioned, the room for revenue mobilization is limited, so the measures should tackle the expenditure side, notably wage, pension, subsidies. At the same time, without broader structural reform, this effort could end up being one-off, generating marginal or short-lived like a benefit. So broader structural reforms needed to support fiscal consolidation at the same time boost the real economy. So structural reforms which can generate the structural savings follows. The first, pension reforms. There, as mentioned in the previous government announcement, actually pension reform is needed to put the public finance in a sustainable footing, including increasing of the retirement ages and then increase the penalty for the early retirement. At the same time, public administration reforms is much needed to support public employment and wage rationalization. At the same time, the intention to cut the subsidies to the public enterprise would be very difficult without serious reform in the public enterprise itself, because without improvement in the operation, these essential services to the public cannot be stopped, which means that the government had to, sometimes forced to provide the guarantees for the activities. So public enterprise reform is very important to reduce the fiscal cost as well as the fiscal risks. At the same time, to lay out the very strong fundamental for the future growth as well as the fiscal savings, the education and health sector should be reformed as well. And as Mr. Sagovnovich mentioned, that the fiscal consolidation is very difficult. And then it is right that the fiscal consolidation would not harm the growth. In the short term, definitely there will be some impact. But there are many ways to avoid this negative impact. First is that the measures can be designed in a more growth-friendly manner. At the same time, there could be a structural measures to complement this real sector, support the real sector activities, so-called investment, diversification, and the sustainable growth, which includes labor market liberalization. The government already committed that there will be reforms in the labor market, labor law, which includes these changes in the severance payment rule, and at the same time, extension of the contractual basis employment. IMF think the changes in the law should be more ambitious than that. For example, application of this industry-wide contract to the overall industry, including SMEs, is putting some pressures and burdens to the small and medium-sized enterprises. And then the restrictions to the laws that restrict this very flexible labor adjustment should be also disconnected. At the same time, the reduction of red tape, which includes the construction permit and then other regulations, are considered the number one kind of hurdles to the business activities by the foreign investors. By implementing these measures, short-term kind of impact of the consolidation, fiscal consolidation on growth can be mitigated. At the same time, stronger corporate governance is very important for the private sector activities. And in general, the state footprint in the economy should be reduced. And then people here in Serbia often emphasize too much on the stability of the fiscal sector, but overall the development of the financial sector, like a financial intermediation, is very low compared to the other countries. So we all know the benefit of this the financial sector development in terms of the growth. So I think in the long term, this Serbian economy should also emphasize the need for the financial sector development. And then before that, obviously the fundamental reforms to ensure the macroeconomic stability is kind of a sort of precondition for all these kind of reforms as well. Thank you very much.